All right, I got asked a question about number 6, 7, and 8 in our reading assignment, so try to help you out best as I can here. 6 says, assume the market for corn is depicted as in the table that appears below. So this table that we have is going to be a supply and demand curve. This is a supply and demand schedule, right? This is the data points, and if we graph this, like we could sit and draw out our demand curves, draw out our supply curves at $1, $2.80. That up here at $2.80, we have a quantity demanded of 180, quantity supplied of 350. We could come and graph those 2 points and go on down the line. The price of $1.80. Quantity demanded is going to be out here at 320. Quantity supplied is going to be back here at 200. And if we were to go through and graph these points, and I'm just giving us a ballpark, we're going to get something that looks relatively close to this interaction of supply and demand. So this demand schedule down here, this table, is just the data that we use to graph both of our supply and demand relationship. So your question is asking what market pressure on price occurs when the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. So if we look here and we go at $1.80, at a price of $1.80, we're going to have 320 demanded and only 200 supply. The quantity demanded is far going to exceed the quantity supplied. So at that price, we're going to see a shortage. So that makes these 200 that are available. You ask yourself, what happens to the value of something when it's in short supply or when there's a shortage? And it's going to increase in value. What's going to be the impact on price? Price is going to rise. You kind of go along the line, and you guys can fill out the rest from here. At $2, 300 demanded, 230 are supplied. Still, seeing this shortage. So all of the production consumption at a price below $2.20 is going to lead to a shortage. You go the other route, and you go above. Okay, what happens to the price? What happens to market pressure on price when the quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demand? Well, you're going to find that in this range. When you come down to $2.60, at that price, demand has dropped off, only 200, but you have a lot of suppliers willing to produce at that price. There's a lot of incentive to produce at that price because higher margins, ability to make more money, profit margins are there. So people are willing to supply at that price. However, there's just not going to be a lot of buyers who are going to be willing to take. So we're going to see at that price a surplus. And when you have a surplus in any market, you guys know the result. You go into the dollar store after Easter or after Valentine's Day or after Christmas, and those things that didn't sell, that were priced too high or above equilibrium, that were in surplus, they go on clearance, right? The prices fall. So you're looking at these two questions. What's the market pressure on price? What market pressure on price occurs when quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied? When the quantity demanded is higher, right, than the supply, that puts what we say is upward pressure on price. It pushes the value of those goods and services up. And the same thing, when supply is greater than demand, we are going to see down pressure. until we reach what we call equilibrium. And this is what all markets are going to naturally gravitate towards. And that is where the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded equal each other. And in this case, that's a price of $2.20. And at $2.20, there's 270 demanded, 270 produced. Everybody who is willing to produce at that price level is able to sell all of their supply, and everybody who wants to purchase at that price is willing to buy. We have no surplus, no shortage, and this is what all markets naturally over time, right, will gravitate towards. Hopefully that helps. Question 7 was the other one. It says, what are the effects on the equilibrium price and quantity of steel? So we're going to draw our demand curve and our supply curve. And this is for steel, that's the market. So what are the effects on the equilibrium price? That would be this price right here in quantity. If the wages of steel workers rise, so that's the one piece of information we're looking for, and at the same time, price of aluminum rises. Most times, most problems that I give you, I will give you an explanation of what these goods are. In this case, aluminum, we would say, is going to be a substitute to steel. Substitute in consumption and production. Similar, not exactly the same thing, might be a stretch, but we're going to say, in this case, it's aluminum substitutes. And on exams and quizzes, I'll make sure that I let you know, and I will point out, kind of in parentheses, substitute for steel. So one thing I wanted to show you quickly is if you look in your readings and notes, I've got this laid out for the demand and supply shifters. There we go. And these are going to outline all the things that we talk about that shift the demand curve. So here, change in consumers' attitudes, tastes, preferences, number of buyers in a market, our income, our expectations of the future, and prices of related goods. And just like the demand curve has shifters, the supply curve does as well. So we have change in the cost of production, anything that makes it more expensive, shift to the left. Anything that decreases the cost, shifts to the right, increases supply. But also we have these expectations of the seller, technology, innovation, change in the price of related goods, numbers of sellers, government tools, taxes, subsidies, and new laws government passed can also shift supply. And what we're going through right now, a natural event with COVID-19. These are things that can all shift supply. So if we go and look at here, wages of steel workers. Well, right away, we should be able to identify what shifter we're dealing with here. This is going to be a change in production cost. Wages are a big part of the cost of supplying. So if you see a situation where wages for steel workers is rising, it's going to become more expensive. It becomes more expensive to produce. We know that the supply curve is going to shift to the left. Okay? Becomes more expensive, shifts to the left. We see this upward pressure on price. We've got this new equilibrium. But at the same time, we've got something else going. We have the price of aluminum rising. So now consumers, right, that would normally be buying either steel or aluminum for their task, whatever it might be, assuming that they're relatively close in use, is going to see a rise in aluminum. Therefore, it's going to push those consumers to steel. So we're going to see an increase in the shift, excuse me, of demand. Okay, for steel, because it's relatively less expensive. So here's our demand curve too. So now we have this new equilibrium, and although our quantity, and we call that undetermined, it's going to be relatively close because one offsets the other, but what we can definitely see is that the price of steel, if these two things happen, price of aluminum rises at the same time wages of steelworkers rise, we're going to see a definite increase in the price of steel. The quantity is going to be indeterminate. The only way you could figure that out is if you knew which one was rising more substantially. But for this sort of problem, we would just say, well, it's undetermined or indeterminate. I hope that helps. I will. Yeah, we can squeeze in number 8 here too. All right, considerable interest in whether the minimum wage rate contributes to teenage unemployment. Draw demand and supply diagram for the unskilled labor market. So here you go. Here's your labor market. Now you have to think about, in terms of this market, okay, this is labor, who's the consumer and who's the supplier? Who is the consumer and who is the supplier? In this case, the supplier is going to be teenagers looking for a job. That is who is willing to supply. So if you go here at 10 bucks an hour, maybe you have 100, and we'll put this in terms of thousands, 100,000 hours that teenagers in a given market are willing to work at $10 an hour. The demand, okay, this is going to be your employers. Places like maybe McDonald's or Subway or wherever. Okay. Well, the question is, what happens? Draw a demand and supply diagram for the unskilled labor market. We'll say teenage unemployment. So we'll say these are unskilled, meaning not totally unskilled, but lacking maybe some education. Discuss the effects of a minimum wage. Who is helped and who is hurt by the minimum wage? Well, typically what the idea is, and there's a lot of talk now about a $15 minimum wage, and let's assume equilibrium in this market is $10, meaning everybody who's looking for a job at that price is willing and is able to find one. And everybody who's out there looking to hire is able to get somebody. There's no unemployment. Well, if the government comes in and says, all right, we are going to set a minimum wage at $15 an hour, right? $15 an hour is the minimum wage. Well, oops, I got these backwards. My bad. It's the end of the day. Sorry. Here's your demand curve. This is your supply curve. So I'm going to flip these around. Teenagers and employers. Ugh. So now, this will make a little bit more sense. Sorry for those of you at home, a little confused. At $15, you got a ton of people willing to go out and work. So your quantity supplied, right, might be out here at 200,000 hours willing to work by teenagers in a market. The problem is, in order for somebody to employ you, you have to be worth it. An employer is not going to pay you to do something that is not worth it to them. So at that $15 an hour, we only have 50,000 hours that are demanded. So just like we saw in the previous one, well, what happens when you have a situation where you have 200,000 hours in demand? Teenagers are out there looking for jobs because, hey, $15 an hour, that's a great thing. I want to work. I want to get more hours. Put me on. While at the same time, producers are like, nope, sorry, we don't need you. We only have this many hours that need to be filled this week. So what we have here is unemployment. Hope that helps.